The moment Kirk Cousins walked out of that tunnel at Allegiant Stadium tonight, this stopped feeling like a normal preseason opener and started feeling like the first real chapter of a story this franchise has been building toward since the day they decided to tank for a quarterback. Let me set the stage properly, because context matters here more than usual. Two brand new head coaches are running these sidelines. Clint Kubiak is getting his first live look at the roster he spent an entire offseason reshaping. And on the other side, Matt LaFleur is doing the exact same thing with a Cardinals team that isn't resting its starters tonight. Both coaches confirmed it themselves. This isn't a night of token appearances before an early exit to the locker room. Jacoby Brissett is leading Arizona's offense with real intent. Rookie back Jeremiah Love is making his professional debut, and that means the Raiders' defense is about to get tested by something padded practice can never replicate, a first-team offense that's actually trying to score on them. That's the part I keep coming back to. You can run drills in the desert heat for 6 weeks and look dominant against your own scout team, but none of that tells you what you have until you're lined up across from a real starting quarterback. That's exactly the situation Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker are walking into tonight, and how this rebuilt linebacker core handles that first real test says more than any padded practice rep from camp. Think about what the front office actually did this offseason. They didn't nibble around the edges of a defense that underperformed. They went out and bought 2 players who were part of a Super Bowl caliber front 7 not too long ago. That's not a patch job, that's a statement. It tells you the people running this building believe last year's problems were about communication and continuity, not talent. So tonight isn't really about whether Dean or Walker makes a tackle. It's about whether a defense full of new faces can process pre-snap motion correctly and play fast instead of thinking. That distinction doesn't show up in a box score, but it shows up immediately to anyone who knows what they're watching for. Now, the guy everybody's actually tuned in for, Fernando Mendoza, is active tonight. He's not starting. Cousins is opening this game exactly as expected, but Kubiak has already made clear that once Cousins comes off the field, Mendoza is playing extensively. This is the night Raider Nation has circled since the moment this franchise bottomed out to land the #1 pick. I'll be honest with you though, I don't think this kid wins a job in August, and I don't think that's remotely the point tonight. The point is watching how he processes speed he's never seen before. Here's what I'm actually going to be studying once he checks in, and it has nothing to do with his stat line. Throw that out entirely. I want to see his internal clock. College quarterbacks who look untouchable against zone coverage sometimes freeze the very first time an NFL edge rusher closes the pocket half a second faster than anything they saw on Saturdays. I want to see whether he resets his feet under pressure instead of bailing the pocket early, because that hesitation, hunting for a third read when the first one was there, is exactly what gets young quarterbacks put on the turf in this league. And I want to see the fun part too, the improvisation. The throw a veteran coordinator would never draw up that somehow still works because the arm talent bails him out. If he finds his way into that end zone even once tonight, in his very first appearance inside this building, that's a moment this fan base holds on to, regardless of what the scoreboard says by the fourth quarter. There's a quieter storyline sitting underneath all of this too. Every rep Mendoza takes tonight adds a little more weight to a timeline that Raider Nation has made clear they don't want stretched across 2 or 3 patient seasons. They want progress now. Kubiak has to manage that noise carefully, because rushing a rookie before he's actually ready has ended more promising careers in this league than patience ever has. Before we even get to the rookie though, I want to see what Cousins looks like running this offense for real. This is a guy coming off a rough stretch bouncing through mismatched systems, now reunited with the coordinator who got the best football of his career out of him back in Minnesota. And there's a chip on his shoulder walking into tonight that goes beyond the quarterback competition, because Cousins already tangled with Max Crosby during a heated camp practice. And instead of letting that moment derail him, he seems to have turned it into fuel. He's probably getting a drive, maybe 2, before Mendoza takes over. So this isn't about a full performance from him. It's about whether he can move this offense with authority in a limited sample and remind everyone exactly why this front office brought him in to begin with. That Crosby incident is worth sitting with for a second, because it tells you something real about the temperature inside this building. When your best defensive player and your starting quarterback get tangled up during a live rep, that's not automatically a red flag. Sometimes 2 competitive players clashing is precisely what establishes standards in a locker room that's still figuring out its identity under a new staff. But it can also be a warning sign if it isn't handled correctly behind closed doors. From what's come out of camp, Kubiak treated it as competitive fire rather than dysfunction, and Cousins responded the way you want a professional to respond, pouring that energy into practice instead of carrying a grudge into the tunnel. Tonight is the first real chance to see whether that translates into actual chemistry, particularly with Brock Bowers, who is unquestionably the top target the moment this passing game gets live again. Speaking of Crosby, his availability tonight is genuinely up in the air, and if it were my call, I wouldn't rush him onto that field at all. He's the anchor of this entire defense, and preseason snaps aren't worth risking anything with a player this important to the plan. But anyone who's followed his career knows that if there's a version of tonight where he can play, he's going to fight for it. That competitive streak is exactly what made him the face of this defense in the first place, and it's also exactly the instinct a coaching staff sometimes has to protect a guy from himself over. Watch that situation closely, because how Kubiak's staff handles Crosby in year one tells you a lot about how much trust already exists between a new regime and its best player. If he's held out and accepts that decision without pushing back publicly, that's a genuinely good sign for where this relationship stands. On the ground, my eyes are locked on the room behind Ashton Jeanty. Mike Washington has been turning heads all camp with a physical downhill running style that fits exactly what this new staff wants to install, and he's been vocal about wanting to put the league on notice the moment the pads came on for real. Tonight is his chance to back that talk up on tape. Behind him, Raheem Blackshear and Dylan Laub are fighting over whatever's left of that third running back job, and in an offense that's clearly going to lean on the ground game under Kubiak, that competition genuinely matters for who's still on this roster come September. I'd caution everyone not to overreact to whatever Jeanty does or doesn't do tonight, assuming he plays much at all. Starbacks almost never get real workloads in preseason openers, and we already lived through one overreaction cycle last year built entirely on a single meaningless drive. The real roster battle in that room lives with the backups tonight, and that's exactly where I'm keeping my attention. The receiver room is where things get genuinely unresolved. Trey Tucker and Jacoby Myers have that top two locked down, but the third job is still wide open, and Jack Beck is holding it for now. Malik Benson is the name everyone in camp keeps bringing up, largely because of the rapport he's already built with Mendoza specifically, and tonight is his opportunity to show that chemistry translates when it actually counts on air. Meanwhile, Dante Thornton is sitting in a spot he cannot afford to be in. He was the buzz story of camp a year ago, and then real football started and the production simply disappeared. If he wants to keep his roster spot, this preseason, starting right now, is where he proves last year's hype wasn't a mirage. I've watched this exact pattern play out across the league more times than I can count. A receiver dominates spring practice, racks up glowing quotes from beat writers, and then the pads go on and the separation disappears because none of it was built against real press coverage from a corner trying to end his career on national television. That's the trap Thornton has to avoid falling into again, and it's precisely the door Benson has cracked open if he wants to leapfrog a guy with a full extra year in this building. Up front, the starting offensive line has stayed completely intact throughout camp. Colton Miller, Alex Kappa, Jackson Powers-Johnson, Dylan Parham, and DJ Glaze rounding out that group. I want to see how they hold up against actual defenders trying to hurt them, not the same scout team bodies they've seen every single day for 6 weeks. This entire offense goes exactly as far as that line lets it go. Full stop. It doesn't matter how live Mendoza's arm looks or how explosive Jeanty is in space if the front five can't buy 3 seconds. It's the least glamorous storyline of the night, and it might end up being the one that matters most by the time real football starts. On the other side of the ball, beyond the star names, I'm watching the young guys actually fighting for real roles on this roster. Tonka Hemingway has reportedly been earning first-team reps and real praise throughout camp, and tonight tells us whether that praise shows up as disruption against a live offensive line instead of just glowing quotes in a press availability. Undrafted and late-round defenders make careers on nights exactly like this one, because a staff evaluating 53 roster spots with fresh eyes needs production on tape, not reputation from OTAs. In the secondary, this is a proving ground for corners like Zach Massey and Jacorian Bennett, guys who need to show they can actually lock down NFL receivers, rather than just look clean in shorts during a walkthrough. If either of them gets tested by Arizona's passing attack and comes away with a pass breakup, that's the kind of tape evaluators circle long after this specific score is forgotten. There's a smaller storyline worth mentioning before we move on. The Raiders added offensive lineman Braden Daniels off the street this week, a depth piece who spent most of last season on Miami's practice squad, and it came with a corresponding move as the team parted ways with another lineman dealing with an injury designation. That's not a headline transaction, but it's exactly the kind of low-cost flexibility a front office needs once real injuries start piling up in August. Moves like that rarely get discussed outside of hardcore roster circles, but the teams that build a real plan for the back of their roster are the ones that don't panic in October when a starter goes down unexpectedly. Step back for a second and think about where this franchise actually sits right now. This isn't a team quietly rebuilding in the background hoping nobody notices. This is a team that traded up, tanked, and burned real draft capital specifically to put itself in position to select a quarterback the front office believes can lead this organization for the next decade. That kind of bet raises the stakes on every single evaluation happening around him. It raises the stakes on Kubiak's play calling. It raises the stakes on Cousins' leadership inside a quarterback room built around competition instead of comfort. And it raises the stakes on every position battle up and down this depth chart, because a team building its future around a rookie quarterback needs real playmakers around him capable of cashing in the moments he creates. There's also a bigger league-wide context worth mentioning here. Every August, national media spends weeks arguing over which rookie quarterbacks look ready and which ones need a redshirt year. Mendoza is going to be part of that conversation whether this coaching staff wants him to be or not, purely because of draft position and the hype that's trailed him since college. That means every throw he makes tonight gets dissected online within minutes by people who've never watched a single practice rep and have no idea what he's actually being asked to do schematically. My advice heading into tonight is simple. Watch the process, not just the results. A rookie playing behind a veteran in his first professional appearance isn't trying to win a job tonight. He's laying a foundation. Judge it through that lens, and you'll walk away with a far clearer picture of where this is actually headed than anyone screaming about a single incompletion online. By the time the backups are cleaning things up in the fourth quarter, we should have real answers on 4 or 5 of these threads. Does Cousins look sharp enough in a limited sample to hold off the pressure building behind him? Does Mendoza flash the poise that made him worth the top pick? Does this rebuilt defense hold its own against a Cardinals offense that isn't holding anything back? And does that third receiver spot finally produce a clear answer after sitting unsettled since the first day of camp? However those questions shake out, one thing is already true tonight. This franchise is being rebuilt in real time, in front of all of us, and everything we're about to watch is only the first chapter.